The crystalline winds of Virac 7 howled through the settlement's outer barriers, carrying ice shards that could strip flesh from bone in minutes. Elder Thexali stood at the observation deck, her scaled hide rippling with barely contained fury, as she watched the scene unfolding in the valley below. "Disgraceful," she hissed, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of tradition. "The cubs should be learning endurance. Instead, they huddle around those soft skins like parasites seeking warmth." In the valley, 20 young Viraki cubs, each no larger than a human child but covered in the beginnings of their protective scales, had indeed gathered around 2 human figures. The humans sat by a crackling fire, their strange cloth coverings somehow keeping them comfortable in temperatures that would challenge even adult Viraki. Karim adjusted his thermal jacket and added another piece of dried wood to the fire. The cubs pressed closer, their large amber eyes reflecting the flames as they chirped softly among themselves. He couldn't understand their language, but their body language spoke volumes. They were cold, tired, and seeking comfort. "The elders aren't happy," Seelan observed, nodding toward the settlement above. Her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air. 3 days now they've been sending the cubs down here for endurance training, and 3 days the little ones have come straight to our camp. Karim looked up at the imposing structures carved into the mountainside. The Viraki had built their homes to blend with the harsh landscape, all sharp angles and defensive positions. It was a civilization born from surviving one of the galaxy's most brutal worlds. The humans' research outpost, by contrast, looked almost comically soft, with its rounded edges and bright orange emergency markers. "Can you blame them?" Karim asked, gently stroking the head ridge of a particularly small cub who had curled up against his leg. "They're just children. The elders seem to forget that." A commotion from above drew their attention. Elder Thexali was descending the carved steps, her powerful legs carrying her down the mountainside with predatory grace. Behind her came 2 other elders, their expressions equally stern. "Humans," Thexali's voice boomed across the valley, her translation device rendering her words in crisp standard. "You interfere with sacred traditions. The cubs must learn to face the cold alone as their ancestors did." Seelan stood, her hand resting diplomatically on her sidearm, not as a threat, but as a reminder that humans didn't survive in the galaxy by being defenseless. "Elder Thexali, with respect, we haven't called them here. They come on their own. Because you coddle them." The elder's tail lashed behind her, scoring marks in the frozen ground. "You make them weak with your fires and your affection." Karim remained seated, the cubs clustering more tightly around him as tension filled the air. "Respectfully, Elder, they're not weak. Watch." He stood slowly, careful not to disturb the young ones. Moving to the edge of their campsite, he began, dismantling a section of their shelter's weather barrier. Immediately, the temperature dropped further and the wind began cutting through their camp. The cubs didn't flee. Instead, they moved with practiced efficiency, some gathering more fuel for the fire, others positioning themselves to block the wind for their smaller companions. Within minutes, they had created their own defensive formation around the heat source. "They've learned adaptation," Karim said, replacing the barrier. "Not just endurance, but creative problem-solving. They're using tools, our fire, our shelter, to overcome environmental challenges. Isn't that what intelligence is about?" Elder Thexali's scaled brow furrowed. "Tradition demands." "Tradition," interrupted Seelan, "is about survival, isn't it? Your people survived because they were smart enough to adapt. These cubs are showing the same intelligence." A small voice piped up from the group of cubs. The smallest one, barely knee-high to Karim, was speaking rapidly in the Viraki language. The other cubs joined in, their voices overlapping in what sounded like urgent explanation. Thexali listened, her expression gradually changing from anger to confusion to something approaching wonder. When the cubs finished, silence stretched across the valley. "What did they say?" Seelan asked. The elder's voice was subdued when she answered. They say the humans have taught them new ways to be strong. That strength isn't always about enduring alone, but about finding creative solutions. She paused, struggling with the concept, about choosing when to be alone and when to seek help from allies. Kareem knelt back down among the cubs, who immediately resumed their positions around him. On Earth, we have a saying, "It takes a village to raise a child." Maybe strength isn't about facing the cold alone. Maybe it's about being smart enough to know when you don't have to. One of the other elders, younger than Thexali, but still ancient by human standards, stepped forward. The galaxy has changed since our traditions were formed. Perhaps our understanding of strength should evolve as well. Thexali stood silent for a long moment, watching as the cubs organized themselves around the fire. They had indeed learned, not just to seek warmth, but to manage resources, to protect the vulnerable, to work as a team. These were not the lessons of traditional Vairaki endurance training, but they were valuable nonetheless. "The cubs will continue their training," she announced finally, "but the curriculum will be expanded. Perhaps these humans can teach us new ways to prepare our young for a galaxy that demands more than simple endurance." As the elders departed, Seelan sat back down beside the fire. "Think we just accidentally revolutionized an entire species' education system?" Kareem chuckled, watching as the cubs settled in for another night of warmth and companionship. "Not the first time humans have changed things just by being ourselves." Above them, the wind continued to howl, but in their small circle of firelight, the cubs slept warm and secure, not because they were weak, but because they had learned that sometimes the strongest choice is knowing when you don't have to be strong alone.